Lindsey Clancy is on trial for unaliving all three of her kids and then attempting to unalive herself. And her husband was never considered a suspect. Now, I find that really hard to believe. And y'all know, like, I saw this trial going, but I was like, I'm gonna just mind my business. I wasn't gonna make it a big thing. But the longer that I watch it, there seems to be an overarching theme here with a lot of these trials and investigations and circumstances of situations where people are being found unalived. And I'm just so confused about how the investigation process is happening. In order for Miss Clancy to be able to be on trial, you're telling me that when the police and first responders arrived to the residence, they didn't consider the partner, spouse, or whomever as the prime suspect. There was no forced entry. They went simply on the assumption that he said that she unalived the kids, and that was it. And the other part of this investigation that's very important to me, because I've been on a deep dive the last couple of days, is that there is a 911 dispatch call, but they actually didn't initially, the husband's attorney didn't initially want it to be released. I don't know if they were actually able to play it in court, or maybe they were just able to have access to like transcripts. But the thing that's interesting to me is he was like asking her what happened, where are the kids, because allegedly when he got into the house, he noticed that the house was very quiet. He started to call for her, and then he found her outside with her neck slit, and it was very difficult for her to talk. And they say that the 911 call captures that, and that the only thing that she was able to say is basement. Now, they say that basement is clearly heard for the people that have heard the 911 call, but I don't know how true that is. I mean, I'm just, we going based off of how much can we believe. Now, there's a lot of discrepancies about different investigation points. One of the most important things is securing the crime scene, right? And it appears that they didn't secure the crime scene appropriately, because there are small intricate details, like her Apple Watch was being used to track her. There's this whole concept around her body's temperature was at 82 degrees when they got to her. She was unresponsive, but I guess she still has some kind of pulse. She ends up going to the hospital. She's in like intensive care. It's a whole thing. She has to get airlifted someplace else, because again, there was like some cuts on her wrist, but then there was a lot going on in her throat. They had her intubated, all that, right? However, when they arrived to the house, her body temperature was 82 degrees. Apparently, scientifically, it takes a certain amount of time for your body temperature to start to drop, and 82 degrees is not normal body temperature. Like, that is not ideal at all. The other thing was that her heart rate was at like, did I hear something? I don't want to lie about the heart rate, but the heart rate was rather low based on the Apple Watch. And they're making the assumption, or there is a lot of discourse online, is what I should say, that if you are actively attempting to unalive people and then yourself, that your heart rate would be up. However, some people are pretty much countering that argument, saying she was on a lot of sedatives. So let's give you a little bit additional background about Miss Clancy. She was suffering horribly with the after effects of postpartum. She had already had other children, and I guess she didn't necessarily have that kind of experience, but she was going through it. She was on a few different combinations of medication, and I think that the medication was altering her ability to just truly be herself, find herself again, and just kind of get back to normal. At about the close of the year leading up to this happened in January. So in like December, she entered herself into or was that January? But somewhere between December and January, she entered herself into a facility. However, this was also after she had vocalized, like, she was starting to have thoughts about hurting the children. She also had already expressed that she had unaliving herself ideations. And I think that it alarms me that somebody close to you says that to you, and you don't do everything in your power to force them to get support and help, to call the doctor yourself and tell them, hey, I don't think this is working. because sometimes women that are struggling with postpartum aren't always honest because they have to be strong because they're someone's mama, right? She vocalized to her husband and her mother that she felt like she was going to harm the children. And then it was so bad to the point where they would always have somebody there with her and the kids. She was heavily sedated with all of this medication. And so that's the argument that maybe she was so heavily sedated, that's why her heart rate was so low. So even if she was doing all of this, then that's the issue. Now, the story goes, the day that this happened, the husband left the house to go get some medicine for the daughter. The daughter had a doctor's appointment earlier that day for constipation. So he was going to the doctor to get her some medicine, and then he was supposed to go pick up some food. It's at some point that a text message was sent, but then also allegedly, Miss Clancy ended up calling her husband to confirm that he could get the generic medication if necessary. That was fine. Now, the largest discrepancy is about the time it takes to get from their home to CVS, because it's not that long. It's maybe like 10 minutes or less to get from their home to CVS, but I think it took him a span of 30 minutes if the time he said was accurate. Now, there's also another discrepancy because he sent an email at like 5:24, but he allegedly was at CVS at 5:30 something. Video surveillance of CVS doesn't necessarily say the same time as what he's saying. So there's a discrepancy in what time he actually left. There's also the discrepancy of he sent the email. It appears he sent the email from the laptop and not his phone. So then there's all the speculation around, did he actually leave at the time that he said? And then the next thing is, did he actually have her Apple Watch? Because there's the forensics person, the digital forensics person just went on the stand today, and there is a window of time that the watch went black. There's no explanation for what happened. Now I would think that's in the window of time that he probably was moving around, because obviously the Apple Watch would track his location if he was thinking about that. Now, there is also additional speculation. This is all alleged because I don't know any of this, but they're saying that it's possible that he could have cloned her phone and that he could have made it look like she was texting him, but he was texting himself to cover his tracks. Also, please note that a few months after his children were unalived and his wife attempted to unalive herself and unalive the children, allegedly, he was fully married with somebody else and had other children. It was no delay in anything. He been cheating on that lady with that new wife. And as far as I'm concerned, how are we not sure that Miss Clancy's spiral wasn't because he was cheating her and wasn't necessarily respecting her as his wife, understanding what her challenges were, not being supportive? Because I feel like that's where a lot of women crumble in that situation, when they don't have substantial support around them. There's a lot going on in this case. And I think that a lot of us are on the side of Patrick did it. Patrick is the husband. I'm convinced that he did it. And I don't know that they can prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. There is unfortunately the portion of it where her mental health was already under scrutiny prior to any of this happening. And that just substantiates the claim that maybe she did lose her mind and snapped. But I don't know. I think Patrick knew that was an easy scapegoat, and he's leaning into that to protect himself. He's anxious. His body language is showing nervousness. What are you hiding, Patrick?